Hey, welcome back for more jet lag analysis. As usual, spoiler warning for episodes 1 through 5. We are going to recap what happened in the last episode, which is episode 5. So Adam continues his run. One thing interesting I found is that he arrives at Yongsan station at 11:39, but it isn't until 2 hours later at 13:47 that he leaves Wangmyong station. Now, that is after finding Jimmy, and I was able to calculate that based on reverse engineering the arrival time for the train that he took to meet Ben and Sam for the battle challenge. So I guess if there's one thing that has been throwing my predictions and analysis off is that I have been consistently underestimating just how long it takes to complete and set up roadblocks. I thought they would be, say, half an hour affairs, maybe 40 minutes at most. But particularly for the Bulldog Challenge, it seems like both teams took well over an hour finding the noodles and filming the tasting of them. So I was initially very optimistic about Adam actually being able to close the gap with Ben and Sam, but that was not the case. He was not able to get on the first train that left Yongsan Station after the 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. dead zone. So Ben and Sam were actually able to pull ahead of Adam. It's just that the battle challenge they set up, as a result, well, not much they can do if Adam wins the battle challenge, right? They did what they could. They blocked off Yongsan, they set up a battle challenge at Chonan and forced Adam into it. They did what they could given the situation, but if Adam's a challenge powerhouse and beats both challenges, what can you do? Going back to what I said the last episode, it would have been better if Dongdaegu was a roadblock instead of a battle challenge. That would actually have fired off and potentially cut Adam's run off over here. So this is how Adam's run looks like from a geographical point of view. Same disclaimer as in previous episodes, this is an outdated map, so this East Coast line here is not represented. But it doesn't matter. Adam did not use that line, he just went up from Seogyeongju all the way up to Cheongyangni and then all the way down to Busan. So there's two interesting things we note here. A lot of Adam's distance, Adam's mileage, was clocked by two very long lines. The first line being the Yongcheon to Cheongyangni train that was very well timed and moved at and went through the stations pretty quickly. The other one was the high speed from Seoul to Busan. Actually, Adam started at Cheonan-asan. That was where the battle challenge started. The high speed from Cheonan-asan all the way down to Busan. This contributed a lot of distance. So these two lines were very key in clocking lots of mileage for Adam, simply because these trains move fast, cover a lot of distance, and it just so happened that the way the game played out, the blockers were not really able to force Adam off the train very effectively. In the previous episode, Adam wasn't metagaming the next run. He knows that he has a winning run. I think what I would have done in his position was actually to crash in such a way that it is as disadvantageous as possible for the next runner. He basically took the fastest route he could. After passing Dongdaegu, he just took the fastest route that would lead him into crashing himself. I think what I would have considered was stalling my run as much as possible. That means eating up as much of the 20 hours as 8 or 18 hours as possible. And perhaps timing it such that it is very difficult for the next runner to find a good train out. That didn't happen, and so what is going to happen is that the next runner gets to start at Dongdaegu, transport node. There's quite a few options out of there at a pretty good time, which is in the first thing in the morning when the rush hour trains are active. Right, people are trying to get to work. There's lots of trains going in all directions. So it does appear that there are a lot of options for the runner, both in terms of number of directions they can go in and the frequency of trains. I've identified 4 options out of Dongdaegu. One is up via the East Coast line. One is up to Yeongju. One is to follow the high-speed track up to Daejeon and Osong. And the last option is the southern coastline down to Samnangjing and Suncheon. Obviously, there are too many options, all branching in different directions, so it's not possible to cover all the outgoing options like it was with the previous run. That being said, I think the opening move by the blockers is crystal clear to the point of being a forced move, arguably, which is to go west and place down a block at Daejeon. As we keep mentioning, it is optimal for the blockers to stay on the high-speed rail, which is the entire yellow stretch, and to block off nodes that give the runner lots of optionality and lots of fast trains, right? So you don't want to let the runner have a free shot at going up to Daejeon, Osong, and Chonan Asan, because there are so many directions in which they can threaten moves after that. So deterring the runner from taking this high-speed line and potentially storming through the entire distance all the way up to Donghae is, in my opinion, a very obvious move. The only problem is, I hope that the upcoming blockers know the train schedules in advance and know that the very first train out to Daejeon actually leaves 2 minutes after the start time. This is actually quite crucial. If they miss this train, they may not have enough time to set up a proper block before the runner gets there. We also note that this train arrives at Daejeon before the runner start time of 8 a.m. It gets in at 7:49. This means that they do not get a free card draw from Daejeon, so they only get to draw 3 cards at the start of the game. If there are no roadblocks within those first 3 cards, that makes things a lot trickier. From here on out, we are just going to assume that Daejeon is successfully blocked. Otherwise, I think it is quite clear that going down the high-speed rail is a very good option for the runner. Right? So, given this opening play by the blockers, which option should the runner pursue? Let's look at each of these 4 options out individually and see if the train timetables line up. Because that's another important part about strategizing for this what might be the final run of the game, which is that there is already a very high score in place by Adam, and so you are really looking to make a huge run. An average run is not enough. It's not going to cut it, and unfortunately, the first option just doesn't cut it. Going up to Pohang might seem like a good idea, attacking the high-speed rail from the other direction. The trouble is, when you there are quite a few train transfers involved, and the amount of waiting time that is required to make each transfer adds up to quite a bit. First, the runner has to wait half an hour for the first train out of Dongdaegu to go up to Pohang, and then from Pohang, it's a whopping 2-hour transfer to the East Coast Line. Up at Donghae, you have to wait another half an hour in order to get the high-speed rail that goes up to Cheongyangni. And after all of that, that gives the blockers more than enough time to shore up their defenses. They can put blocks down at Yongsan, Cheongyangni, and Gwangmyeong. This is a bit questionable. So I don't think we're going to look at this route in detail. The train timings just make this a little worse than the subsequent options, such as this one, going up to Yeongju. You'll notice that from Dongdaegu, there are 2 routes up to Yeongju, one via Gimcheon and one via Yongcheon. Based on the train timetables, the Gimcheon one is more viable because there's a train out immediately after the jail period is up at 8:04 a.m. The runner can head up to Gimcheon, which covers a fair bit of distance, by the way. This Daejeon to Dongdaegu stretch is pretty long, so being able to cover this stretch up to Gimcheon is pretty good. Then a relatively quick transfer up to Yeongju. Then from there, it's a rather similar route to what Adam took. If you remember, Adam started at Seogyeongju and went up to Yeongju. This option is basically replicating that route. You go up here, you go through the choke point at Cheongyangni and Yongsan, and hope to overcome whatever the blockers have waiting in store for you. This is the rush option. This gives the blockers the least amount of time to place the defenses down at Yongsan and Cheongyangni, which is the main strength of this route. The reason I'm personally not a big fan of this route is that it... Two reasons. Firstly, it doesn't cover a lot of distance. In fact, you are basically directly competing with Adam's run, which follows a very similar route, but you don't have the option of doubling back to Dongdaegu because you started at Dongdaegu. So you're basically railroaded into going down to Iksan and going down to Suncheon. And that leads into the second problem, which is that if you do this route from Dongdaegu up and then down to Iksan and then perhaps down to either Suncheon or Gwangju Sojong, I do not think this is enough distance to beat Adam's run. In order to beat Adam's run, you would need to either cover this southern portion here or this southern portion here. And I'm not sure there's a reliable way to do this before the time limit is up because these two services are very infrequent. So your run basically is at the whim of the train schedules between around the Suncheon station. It's still a viable route, I think. The runner, whoever the runner is, Sam or Ben, may well take this route, but I think it's a little volatile towards the end. So I won't look too much into this option either. I will focus more on the last two options, which I feel have more potential. The first is to YOLO and run directly into the block at Daejeon. As we mentioned before, the blockers only have 3 cards going into Daejeon, so it may well be worth betting on there being no block at Daejeon. And if that's the case, well, you may be able to make a huge run. And if there is a block, well, given the amount of distance you have to cover, you probably have to face a block sooner rather than later. You may as well face it sooner, when the blockers have the least amount of time to prepare and set up lots of surrounding cursors or practice the battle challenge and so on. So basically getting the tough part out of the way and then setting up a situation where the blockers cannot get in front of the runner because it's a high-speed line. The first option out to Daejeon for the runner is at 8:15 a.m., arriving just past 9 a.m. at Daejeon. Assuming that the block here is overcome, or if there is no block, this route actually branches into 2 main options, which is why I like this route. A lot of the other options are railroaded. We saw like the Pohang route and the Yeongju route all have choke points at Yongsan. Whereas this one, there are actually 2 very divergent routes that the blockers can't fully cover. The first option is up north through the Yongsan area. So there is a pretty insane train. Again, as a reminder, this arrival at Daejeon is at 9:05 and we expect that the runner will spend a bit of time here doing a challenge. Say it takes 1 hour to complete a roadblock or a battle challenge. 1 hour is actually sufficient to then transfer onto this 10:24 train that heads directly to Gwangmyeong Station. It does not stop at Osong. It does not stop at Cheonanasan. So even if the blockers are playing preemptively, they drop a roadblock at Daejeon early in the morning and then start heading up northwards to block off the other nodes on the high-speed rail, well, the runner has this option which allows them to completely bypass the main nodes on this high-speed line and go directly up to Gwangmyeong. This is a very powerful option. I think basically short of the blockers preemptively noticing this exact express train and heading directly up to Gwangmyeong themselves, they will not be able to stop the runner from teleporting all the way up. In fact, the only good option I can think of for the blockers is if they luck into the curse of the U-turn, forcing the runner to U-turn from Gwangmyeong back to Daejeon. That would be pretty painful. But otherwise, this train, if the runner can make it, almost guarantees that they'll break free of the grasp of the blockers and be able to have free reign over the northern part of the map. That's not the issue. The issue is after noon, when the runner gets into Cheongyangni Station and starts heading towards the northeastern part of the map, that is where things slow down by a lot. Because based on my research, while there are options, like the runner can sneak around in the northeast part of the map, a lot of these options require 2 to 3 hours of transit time, which burns away at the total time limit. The fastest option from Cheongyangni at noon would be to go down this way, down to Bujeon, taking this train that Adam took on his previous run, just in the other direction. The problem is, you end up in Bujeon at the end of the day, but that's assuming that you don't get forced off the train. The blockers can easily plant down cursors and roadblocks to slow the runner down this route, and if slowed down enough, the runner may very well not be able to clock this distance to Suncheon, which means that they might not be able to procure a high score. Because if you look, this route is actually eerily similar to that of Adam's run, except that he doesn't have this starting distance from Seogyeongju. So if the runner decides to crash themselves up at Dongdaegu just like Adam did, I'm not sure they would actually be able to clock more distance. So this is fairly iffy. A more reliable way of clocking more distance is to go up to Donghae instead. And there is actually a pretty fast train out from Cheongyangni to Gangneung that gets in at before 3 p.m. The problem is there are no East Coast lines down for the rest of the day. Right, you won't be able to reach Pohang by the end of the day, and so that makes this a very slow option as well. So actually, even though there is a nice run from Dongdaegu to Donghae via this entire high-speed rail stretch, the train timings at the northern half of the map just don't really line up very well, unfortunately. So, but that is one option that the runner can threaten. If the blockers overcommit and overfixate on blocking this hyper-efficient route to Gwangmyeong, the other option for the runner is actually to pivot from Osong down to Iksan and take the southern coast route. There's actually a chain of trains whose timing perfectly lines up, right? So again, assuming it takes about 1 hour to complete whatever block there is at Daejeon, 1 hour later, there is a train from Daejeon to Osong, and from Osong, there is a relatively quick transfer that goes straight down to Suncheon. So if the blockers have not preemptively moved down to Iksan to defend Iksan, or if they haven't defended Osong preemptively, the runner gets a very good run down the south coast, which clocks a lot of distance. Normally, the south coast is avoided by the players in general because the train timings down south are very unreliable. But if you look at this is about as good as a transfer as you get on the south coast, because from Suncheon, where the train drops you off at 12:38, there is a very quick transfer that goes straight to Bujeon. I cannot stress how rare this is. It is so difficult to line up a good transfer down from or to Suncheon. The only trouble with this route really is that the timings are non-negotiable. You have to take these trains. The transfers are very good, but you cannot miss them. If the blockers somehow manage to throw down a curse somewhere, or if there is a block at Osong that forces the runner to miss this train, then you cannot take it. This option is completely off the table, because if you miss the 12:51 from Suncheon, the next train from Suncheon leaves 5 hours later. That basically is a nail in the coffin in terms of getting enough distance to beat Adam. So yeah, it's a high-risk route in the sense that just one interception from the blockers is enough to throw this entire plan into the garbage bin. However, if successful, I think this would be the most likely route to escape the blockers and make a winning run. Because from Bujeon, there is actually another good connection. You land in Bujeon in 16:03. At 16:28, there is a train out to Gyeongju that gets in by the end of the day. So at the end of the day, you would have covered the entire southern half of the map, clocking up a very respectable distance while still maintaining optionality for the next day to go up either direction. Pretty good. pretty good route. It's just rather reliant on not getting slowed down by the blockers at all early on in the day. So those are the two main options, assuming that the runner attempts to challenge the block directly at Daejeon, but there's also a secret third option. I know the Jetlag team loves their secret third option. Here's the secret third option, which is to take that southern route, but in the other direction, going clockwise along the south instead of counterclockwise. So, from Daegu, there is a train immediately out at 8 a.m. that goes down to Busan. You remember the service that Adam took down to Busan? Well, it's basically the same line that goes down to Busan, arriving at 8:49 a.m. Then there's quite a long wait. You can see that the lines along the southern route really don't have favorable transit timings. You have to take a 1 hour transfer to get to Samnanjin, and then another 40-minute transfer to get down to Suncheon. So not great in terms of timings. But it does get you into Suncheon at 1:30 p.m. So if you can get all the way to Suncheon, it's pretty decent because you do avoid the block at Daejeon, making this a less risky move. And you get to clock considerable distance with the entire northern part of the map still in play. The issue is 1:30 p.m. at Suncheon is a little late. If you look at the previous option, the blockers can use this very route to Suncheon and get there before the runner gets in at 1:30. The blockers can potentially get into Suncheon half an hour earlier, which means that they can set up a roadblock at Iksan, they can set up a roadblock in Suncheon, or the worst case scenario, if they do a curse on the route from Samnanjin to Suncheon, that can cause a 3-hour delay for the runner because the trains from Samnanjin to Suncheon, as we have established, are very infrequent. This basically is the option that kicks the can down the road. Instead of confronting the blockers directly at Daejeon, you're saying, okay, you know what, I'll confront you about, 200, 300 km later at Suncheon and Iksan. The blockers can put up a good amount of defense at Iksan and Suncheon. These are both choke points, and this route from Samnanjin to Suncheon in particular is rather vulnerable. But assuming that the runner can get past these blocks, there are very good options out north that can seal up a high score, including this efficient train that skips Osong and Chunra Atsan and goes directly to Gwangyang. I think this route is interesting because this is the danger zone for this particular route. The blockers have to make the most out of defending this entire area by 1:30 p.m. If the runner can overcome this one set of defenses, they are home free. They basically just get to run the rest of the high-speed rail route, and this is enough distance to beat Adam. It's just that this one particular choke point is going to be pretty difficult to overcome. Like the blockers can place significant amounts of defenses here. So which of these options will the runner take? And for that matter, who will the runner be? There's only one way to find out. Let's see how it goes.